course, about the main thesis, I think, of the life's work that he has done about Judaism and the afterlife. He really has indeed written the book about Judaism and the afterlife. And by the way, the books are available outside. They're not for stealing, they're for taking and paying for them after Shabbos and Yontif. So if you'd like to take a copy of the book, please do take a copy and then send a check to congregation in Bnei Ammona, and we'll make sure to get that money to the author of the fine book. The last comment I'll make is that we, of course, have davening on Sunday and on Monday, Sunday morning and Sunday evening. Monday, of course, is Yizkor, the memorial service, which will take place around 11 o'clock in the morning. Both on Sunday and Monday, we'll hear from Dr. Raphael. I'm sure he has many, many insights that will be helpful to us in our process of reciting the Yizkor. So now, without any further ado, it is my honor to call upon Rabbi Simcha Raphael, who's going to stand in the center and share with us some thoughts. There is one page that was distributed to all of you. That is the Mishkan, and he's going to give us a little brief taste. And tonight you can hear some more, and Sunday some more, and Monday some more. And thank you again for being with us. Paul and Deanne, we love you. Thank you for sponsoring this weekend again.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom Uvarach.
It's just so wonderful to be here in such a warm and welcoming congregation. And as I said earlier, earlier you heard Rabbi Neil Rose speak, and Rabbi Carney Rose is your rabbi. So there were Hasidic dynasties that had multiple generations. So with two brothers around and a brother-in-law, all rabbis. Did I miss any other family members? Isn't that right? Your congregation is part of the Rose family rabbinic dynasty, and I know that Carol and Neil have a lot of nachas being here. So Shabbat Shalom, it's an honor to be part of this Gallant Motivational Inspirational Weekend series. So my thanks to the Gallant family, and my thanks to Rabbi Rose for the invitation to be here. And my thanks for for you being here, because if you didn't show up, I'd actually have no reason to be here. So we just finished, or earlier we read Parshat Bamidbar, which was a description of the lining up of the tribes surrounding the Mishkan in preparation for a census that God had demanded of the Israelites in the wilderness. And in the first book of the chapter, first verse of chapter 1 of Bamidbar, Numbers, we read, Adonai spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the desert of Sinai on the first day of the second month of the second year after the Israelites came out of Egypt. He said, take a census of the whole Israelite community by their clans and families, listing every man by name, one by one. So God requested a very formal gathering of the entire tribal community to get a realistic sense, or senses as it were, of who was there among these masses of slaves who had made their way out of Egypt. Remember, it was the Eruv Rav. It was a kind of woolly group of freed slaves who were coming out. So everybody is lined up according to their tribal groupings surrounding the Mishkan, which the inner circle is surrounded by the different families of the Levites. And you actually have that graph. This was also my son's bar mitzvah portion. And I was very curious. It was like you know what a mandala is in Indian art? A mandala is sort of an imagistic description of the divine that's often symmetrical. So this is the Jewish mandala of the Mishkan. So for us moderns who are used to getting quick text messages and emails short and to the point, I got a long email from somebody and I responded quickly and I realized I hadn't even read the whole email. We want things to be very instantaneous and very, very quick. So to be truthful and with all due respect, this morning's Parsha, the text of it is kind of boring. It's not a literary narrative. It's an extensive list of names and numbers. First, there are the names of the tribal leaders, and then the census statistics. Those who were counted of them from the tribe of Dan were 62,700. Those who were counted them from the tribe of Asher were 41,500. That's the whole first chapter too. Goes on like that. So it's not it's not gripping biblical narrative, but from a visual point of view, as you can see on your graphic, and keep looking at the graphic, but also listen to what I'm saying, because there's a little bit more to be said about this. As Rabbi Neil Rose said earlier, if you'd fly over in a helicopter and you would see it, it's very, very profound. Could you imagine? The statistics were over 600,000 people. That was actually men who could go to war. So when you add in the women and children, it took an incredible logistical team. The closest thing I ever came to that was 500,000 people at a papal mass in Montreal, right? But all those from 20 years old and upward, all who were able to go to war, it was this incredible sense of logistical pageantry. But the deeper mystery of all of this is that this gathering of the tribes took place surrounding the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed, with the tabernacle, with the Mishkan at the center. So, amidst this fantastic display of pageantry, we want to stop and ask, what was in the Mishkan? What was at the center of that gathering? What was at the center? What do you remember? The Ark and the Ten Commandments, right? But it turns out that there's even more. And in a short time, I want to talk a little bit about what else is there. So to do that, I need to rewind the Torah scroll back to where we were last night with first the death of Jacob, and then after Jacob dies, we read in the last psukim, the last sentences of the book of Joseph, the book of Genesis, about Joseph's death. Joseph said to his brothers, I am dying, but God will take account of you and will bring you up from this land to the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Joseph had the children of Israel, meaning his brothers, swear, quote, when God takes account of you, bring my bones up from here. And Joseph died being 110 years old. They mummified him and they put him in a coffin in Egypt. Okay, so that's how the book of Genesis ends. So Midrashic tradition tells us that Joseph was buried somewhere in Egypt. And when do we next hear of Joseph's bones? As the slaves are getting ready to leave Egypt, we're told in the book of Exodus, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had solemnly sworn the people of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. Do you remember the movie, The Ten Commandments, made by Cecil B. DeMille? Well, if you don't remember it, it's a great movie to watch. There's a scene where there's this throng of people going, and you actually see they're carrying a bier that has on it a wrapped mummy. Cecil B. DeMille did his midrashic homework, and they're carrying on their way out of Egypt Joseph's bones. All the people are running around stealing jewelry, taking booty from the Egyptians, and Moses is going to schlep Joseph's bones on the way out of town. Now, it's fascinating. There's a variety of midrashim that we can't go into. Where does Moses find Joseph's bones? It's 400 years later. He's going to get Joseph's bones. And, Joseph didn't leave like a little, he didn't send a text saying, go look over here. So there's all these stories about how he finds Joseph's bones. One of my favorite is Moses took a tablet of gold on which he engraved the name Yud-He Vav-He, and throwing it into the Nile, he cried out immediately. The coffin with Joseph's bones came up to the surface, and Moses took it. You made a comment about magic earlier, right? So he's doing magic, and actually there's stuff that's related to the myth of Isis and Osiris. It's very fascinating stuff. But then the question is, so what they do with that? Right? He gets Joseph's bones out of the Nile, and what does he do with it? And the Midrash, Exodus Rabbah, says, during the entire 40 years wandering in the wilderness, the bones of Joseph traveled with them. So for 40 years, as they schlepp through this long desert journey, Joseph's bones are not an afterthought. Along with the Mishkan, at the center of the tribal gathering are Joseph's bones. In complying with Joseph's deathbed request to bring my bones out of here, the Israelite 40-year-long journey wandering through the desert is both a liberation pilgrimage, a journey to freedom, as well as a funeral procession honoring the dead. They are carrying Joseph's bones to be buried in the land of Canaan. And in fact, there is a third text in Torah where they talk about his bones being buried after the settlement of the land. So that 40-year journey is both a liberation journey and a funeral procession honoring the legacy of the ancestors. Okay, but wait, that's not all that was at the center of the Mishkan. Remember what happened when Moses came down from the mountain and he saw the people worshiping the golden calf? You didn't see the 10 Commandments? Right? He throws them down and they're shattered. He comes down right at just at this time at Shavuot, and he breaks the commandments, and then he goes back up at the beginning of Elul and comes back down 40 days later, which happens to be Yom Kippur. So the Talmud tells us that the broken tablets were placed in the ark next to the unbroken tablets. So in the wilderness, during the entire time in the wilderness, the Israelites carried not only Joseph's bones, but also the broken tablets of the Ark of the Covenant. So hold that image for a second. There's all this grand tribal gathering, and what's at the center? There's the 10 Commandments, the Torah, if you will, which is sort of the spiritual technology for living a holy life in connection with the divine. But there's also Joseph's bones, which symbolize for us the connection with those who have died, with those ancestors in the world beyond. Just as Moses and the Israelites couldn't go forward, couldn't leave their slavery without bringing Joseph's bones, similarly in our lives, as we go forward, we aspire to remember our loved ones on the other side, our loved ones in the world beyond. One time I was talking about this parsha. It was at a congregation in Las Vegas, and they were renting from a church, so they had a memorial board that they brought to each service on wheels. And it was like, you're remembering the ancestors. I didn't get to see where all of your Yortzeit plaques are because it's a newer building, but sometimes I come into a synagogue and it's like 110 years old and you see all of the names of the ancestors. So we have in Judaism this tradition of connecting with those ancestors in the world beyond. And so there's a lot of ancient wisdom that reminds us to both honor the memory of the dead and to travel with Joseph's bones and with the memory of our ancestors wherever we go. And similarly, just as the Israelites brought with them the broken commandments, on our journey through life, we sometimes bring our own brokenness. And that's what the broken commandments tell us, that there's not perfection in life, that there's brokenness in life. When we do a wedding, we break a glass. Yes, it's to remind us of the destruction of the temple, but when I do that with a young bride and groom, I say, look, on this day, you're getting married and everything is beautiful here, but as you go out into the world, remember that there's brokenness in the world and that you want your marriage to be a catalyst for making the world a better place. So the broken tablets in the Mishkan reminds us to honor the brokenness in our lives, that's part of who we are. So the message that I want to take from the Parsha this morning is that we build a community, an interweaving of tribes and various family associations in a wonderful and beautiful building, and Torah is at the center. The Mishkan is at the center. But along with Torah at the center in our lives, we continue to live more godly lives, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be loving to family and friends. That's what Torah asks us to do. At the same time, we recognize that we're still works in progress, that we're not perfect, but we're flawed human beings aspiring to do better and to serve God more clearly each day. And as we do this, we also want to invite the ancestors on the other side, the legacy of the generations, those who reflect that transition between this world and the world beyond, to be with us and to inspire our lives. So this, to me, is the inner mystery of the Mishkan, that this is the otherworldly mystery, that we live our lives, we live the fullness of our lives, and that we honor our connection with the legacy of the generations, and that we ask God to be kind to our hearts and with each other, so that our brokenness can be catalysts for making the world a better place.
Amen.
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos.